No.
Hello, everybody. On behalf of Women and Health Together for Future, we welcome you all for the online documentary premiere and panel discussion. Getting to Zero, identifying critical concerns of gender-based violence with the communities near Capetown, South Africa. I am Dr. Surekha Taide, the Vice Chair of Women and Health Together for Future. Our organization is an international NPO based in South Africa. We have our secretariat at UWC Cape Town. And this this online documentary premiere is a very important message which we want to give our participants in the form of a documentary, which the primary author of this documentary is Dr. Judy Lewis, who is the chair of Women in Health Together for Future. This has been directed by myself and edited by Ms. Bhagyeshri Taide. And we have Dr. Hester Julie, who will be leading the panel, who is the moderator of the panel. And I would request Dr. Hester Julie to introduce our other stakeholders and other partners in this documentary, as well as please introduce our panelists before we premiere the documentary. Over to you, Dr. Hester.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody, and so glad to see you are all very eager to contribute. It is a pleasure to introduce to you three of the previous panelists. They formed part of the one panel group in May when WHTF's board met to discuss certain issues with regard to gender-based violence. So I'm going to go from the left to the right. So on our left is Miss Bonita Ngwenya. She is a doctoral research fellow, and she's been involved in gender-based violence in the various sectors for a very long time. Then our second panelist that you see on the screen, in an apology, unfortunately she has interviews. So for Santa Cruz will not be represented today on the panel. Then you will see Dr. Renee de Villiers. She is one of the forensic people who has been giving a lot of input, and we depend a lot on her in terms of the medical component in the Department of Health input. Then on next to her is Pastor Griselda Pinto. She is from Lionhearts Ministries. And she, having been a survivor of gender-based violence and having walked the road, she is really planting into the hearts awareness and helping not just survivors, but also young people to navigate this whole scenario of gender-based violence. So this is all from my side, and I also would like to say thank you to all the panelists and also for those who are going to contribute.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Hester Julie. Professor Hester Julie is the former Executive Director of Women in Health Together for Future, and she is the Extraordinary Professor of Faculty of Nursing, UWC, and she has contributed significantly in the development of this documentary. Thank you, Professor Julie, for all your contributions. I would now be premiering the video, and I would like everybody to please, the audio, like Dr. Good, mute yourself, please. Yeah. So is that fine now? Should I start the video? Thank you everybody for joining.
At least 4 people are known to have
Featuring women in South Africa, Cape Town, have experienced rape in their lifetime.
The minister has proclaimed that enough is enough, and the community is protesting vehemently that action be taken.
I am a woman. I am a vagina. I am a mother. And I agree, enough is enough. Enough is enough.
Women and Health Together for Future is an international organization based in Cape Town, South Africa. WHTF collaborated with the University of Western Cape to arrange a symposium on critical concerns of gender-based violence on May 11, 2023. More than 100 people from 7 countries interacted through presentations, panel, and small groups. The participants belong to the WHTF board members, the university scholars and researchers, community-based organizations, and government personnel. Elizabeth Dartnell, the Executive Director of SVRI, was the keynote and spoke on advancing research for ending gender-based violence.
The panel discussion focuses on collaboration between universities and community-based organizations, especially the Fizantikar Group and Lionheart Ministry.
Today we want to hear from the diverse stakeholders of UWC programs. What do they think are the issues with regard to collaboration between UWC and their specific organization?
Institution can do it all. No one sort of state department can do it all, but together we can definitely do it. And we need to, in understanding what your partners can do, in understanding, I think a practical example is when I came away from working clinically, I was working at the coalface as a sexual offences examiner, and I came away from the clinical aspects into the more just more office-based and sitting in on meetings and fora, and that's when I first sat in on the Victim Empowerment Program Forum. And that's when I realized there's so much happening and there's so many facets of taking hands and working together for our victims. But it's my eyes opened when I understood what the partners are doing and what we can all contribute.
But I think it's so important to create that sphere in terms of the feedback and held and be responsible in terms of the expectations when you touch the lives of ordinary people, whichever partner you are, whether it is a leader in the community, whether it is from the university doing the research, or whether it is the clinicians that provide the research. And, you know, I am also thinking in terms of currently in health where I am involved with emergency, the ambulance services. So these are the individuals, and we have our public health response.
because that really leads to miscommunication and conflict between the students and the community organizations. And we really do want the students there because they enhance our projects. If we can have a system where students are coming in and they already have the basis of what's happening in the community, then they can just take on a project that's already there and just continue with it.
Second question is, what works to facilitate collaboration?
I think also, like I said, something simple like having a hub for the students. We know exactly where the students are and where we can go to and know where to find UWC. That was really helpful. And like I said, just having the students there, helping the volunteers with their projects.
I've had personal experience with the justice system that has failed me, where I lost a case that walked on for 2-3 years. At the end of the day, the DNA was lost, the files were missing. They kick out cases like that constantly. And even though we have a law and a policy that you can take up your case 20-30 years later, you don't want to put that same victim through that things. And there's certain things like another lady, I think it's one of the professors or the dean that mentioned about the subconscious, that plays a huge role.
There's a theme that was created during the lockdown. It's not leaving anyone behind. And I think as a higher education institution, the measures that need to be put in place, and especially with health, remains, and everybody can have that access.
It's a beautiful example of collaboration. The Tutuzela Care Centres came about. They are one-stop centres where we look after victims of gender-based violence. And I still say victims because when we see our patients there, they're usually still a victim. But the Tutuzela Care Centre sort of motto is together we help victims become survivors, and that's a journey, and that journey often doesn't start the moment the victim presents for a medical examination. It often starts much later, and we see that our patients need a lot of psychosocial support, ongoing support. So Tutuzela Care Centre is really a very centralized service where there is always a medical doctor or a forensic nurse examiner on duty in order to do the forensic examination for a patient who presents after sexual violence.
So there's a lot of things involved where the church needs to take its stand. They need the training available, and especially with students. So students usually get plugged into faith-based churches around the residences, and that's where I started reaching out to them because they haven't felt comfortable by going to counselors on the universities.
The families and community groups expressed critical concerns.
But when it comes to real issues in our communities, we lose the essence of family. It's only through families that we really, our social fiber in our communities is gone. And it's gone because we've allowed it to be gone. But how do we bring it back into the GBV space? Is to make sure collaboratively we address it.
Sometimes just ordinary people like me, myself, don't have the knowledge to go to. Or even to work with a broken woman. The passion is there, but the connection is not there. The community, sometimes, you can just relate to somebody, connect with somebody. Will, like, if you come through rape, whatever, the best person is like somebody that went through the same thing what that person went through. But
I just want to say that, first of all, I think we're all here because we really do want to get to zero. And I hope that hope grows up in a world with zero prevalence of violence against women and children. I think we have a lot of work to do.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you very much. If you can have that slide, please, Shannon, the photo.
Just make it full screen. Yeah. Thank you.
There we go. So WHDF would like to acknowledge that the WHDF board members, also that the head of UWC's Diversity Center, and then all the other people who has helped us. So we don't pretend that this is only our work. It was a collaborative effort, and that is why we are still trying to build and strengthen this partnership. This is also the reason why we are continuing today with a follow-up to take the discussion forward in terms of gender-based violence, WHDF, UWC, and our collaborators and our partners. If you can go to the second slide, please, Shannon. Shannon.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know why it is not going to the next.
Or do you want to let me share the screen? Anyhow, while she's trying to get up the first slide, the in terms of the planning for this input from the panelists, during this documentary, we didn't really give you a very good factual background in terms of the status of GBV in South Africa. So Bonita and myself has compiled this few slides just to help the participants, especially from other countries, to understand what has South Africa done thus far, trying to get to zero. So the first slide, the next slide, please. South Africa has actually realized that it's costing the country a pretty penny, not just in terms of monetary, but also in terms of the social fiber. So there has been a very strong, it was a campaigns happening and pressure has been in fact, on the president to really commit to not just managing, but trying to eradicate gender-based violence. So during the pandemic, the president actually has considered that gender-based violence was the second epidemic in South Africa. And it was during that time that the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence was launched in April 2020. And interesting that it was actually launched under the women's group, the Department of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities. So for me, that is very strategic where this is situated. Second slide, please. Then also in terms of getting to zero, even in this year's State of the Nation address, once again, they have prioritized gender-based violence and femicide. And what is interesting is that there is specific components linked to this. Just go down, please. And this strategic plan rests on six pillars. On six pillars. And Bonita is going to speak to the 6 pillars in terms of her research funding. But what I am very excited about in terms of getting to zero is the next slide. That in this very 20, go down, please. Yes. This year, the government for the first time has introduced a new law to protect the women and children from abuse and gender-based violence. And it has formed the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. The bill was actually signed into law. Now that is for us a very exciting change. And with that has come along a lot of other changes. But as we know, many of our country's policies, their laws are very, very progressive. But what is usually lagging is the implementation. And that is why I've asked the panel for this specific discussion to focus on what has happened in their specific sector.
Number 9250
Can we maybe just mute the other people, please? Okay, so I am now going to ask for Bonita, if you are ready, maybe just to just give us a quick overview of your findings in terms of the key pillars of the National Strategic Plan.
Esther, thank you so much. I want to acknowledge this research is in the light and the background of what happens on the ground between stakeholders. And yes, the findings is so consistent with research that's been done, and we can acknowledge all, even in terms of our documentary, the quotes and the issues raised is very coherent. So when it pertains to the pillars, the 6 pillars, which we will address in the latest slide after the findings, I just want to point out in terms of the concretizing, and I think this exercise has made, bring the priorities to the fore, which the research shows, the priorities, why it's so important to have a response. Now, within the context of health research in the community healthcare environment, where these survivors of gender-based violence has to prevent themselves, what would it be then, and how this relates to the, and it's also important to know, yes, we have the strategic aims and even our provincial plans, strategic plans for the implementation, when each province will set the priorities and also earmark what indicators they will have as a province to see the changes happening. So I want to point out in the findings with the stakeholder issues, as you see in the first column, when we say, and on all 3 says lack, because in the research it was a problem analysis. So yes, the policies are there, the implementation should happen, but and the actual handling of cases, etc., is happening. Findings and presented today is the lack of within the cooperation. And under stakeholders cooperation, you can see the first aspect that is mentioned is safety and security. Within the context of violence and threats and the issue of disclosure, that disclosure will and cannot happen in the issues in a context like this. And I think it also, when Hester speaks to the pillars, which we will go to in the next slide, the pillars having to make sure and secure that the environment where the health is offered should address that, and we will see in the next slide. And then, of course, the next point says, how can we talk about screening, as WHO has pointed out? With this context, how can you even attempt screening knowing full well that there is a risk of safety, not only to the survivors, but also the healthcare workers that would bring the type of violence to the attention of the police. And of course, the lengthy process, judicial judicial processes, and in fact, even the officers, the police, etc., health workers included, with an inadequate knowledge of intimate partner violence, where it can lead to, and that also contributes to this disclosure being unsafe when the correct processes aren't followed. The second research finding in terms of all the stakeholders is a lack of synergy. And synergy basically means that we have norms and standards in this instance, this and that should happen. Disclosure, safety plan, safety, and then the actions. So you could see between the stakeholders, there is not, even within the same areas within the metro or where the research was conducted, is not standardization in how teams go about and processes are done in terms of getting a survivor to the next level with that safety, or from the community to the hospital. So even on that, there is a synergy. And unfortunately, it is also the ethical obligations of health workers to hold aspects into confidence which the clients bring to their attention, and that also affect whether or not they will proceed with the police or not. And they would find themselves that the police also now, because they don't want to make a case, will say, look, this is a health matter. We're not interested in taking this victim to another place because they don't want to report to the police. Now you find an individual in the context of the health environment without any form of safe transport to the next level, even to return to a safer place. So this lack of synergy, standardization across these various platforms just makes it impossible, where people in fact will feel safe to disclose. And then there's, even within the processes as well as the specialized unit, a disjoint, meaning the police wouldn't act in the same way that the FCS members would act with more knowledge. When survivors comes and the ordinary police men and women are faced with a survivor, they actually do not follow the procedure that should be followed at the police station. And it also can lead to inappropriate referrals. We have had a big case in the South African context where, from a health worker, a 14-year-old didn't get attention, medical attention, was referred to the police, and that in fact has also given a reason to the upscaling of health policies. The third aspect is the lack of teamwork, where you can see within the unit at a specific center, at a specific health center, you now see the limited choices the survivors have when they come and present themselves. If they and they're not going further with the police, it limits them for resources like returning, follow-up care, transport, and then if they do want to go further in terms of wanting to make a police case, if the processes are not in place to assure safety and security, then of course that also leaves them a little bit stranded. So then they again, within the same team, there is not the consistency in the standardization of ensuring a good outcome. And then the next point, isolated experience of the challenges. This would be that the police will say, look, we don't have vehicles. The health team will say, look, we don't have a car to actually, from our clinic, take a survivor to the district hospital less than 5 kilometers away for where this actual Tutuzela care center is. So there's lack of resources. They find, even in the police station, they will say, we can't get hold of the FCS person, they are not available, and you have to wait or come back when the specific police person is present. So now you see that all of this is happening in isolation. So the whole comprehensive care the client suffers in the end. So I think there should also be, in terms of that aspect, the research is there, but recognition that unfortunately things don't work smoothly all the time. And then consistently, the participants for this research study has indicated that it's very difficult and that such involvement is not at times very pleasant for the community members or those that report the incidents. And the last aspect is both the synergy, how they work together, and debriefing. So this means that aspects where within the team issues come to light, whether it's ethical, whether it is between the team members, disjointing processes, but there is really not a process in place to hold these separate team members to account in terms of their ethical requirements, and this would refer to unprofessional or insensitive conduct by nurses, doctors, and SAPS members. And then whenever any individual has got the allocation or the role in terms of intimate partner violence at a facility, and this is a health facility, there's stigmatization that happens, and the dumping happens when whichever form of violence happens, then this champion is there now to whatever type of violence, and it doesn't mean necessarily the gender-based type of violence with the specific protocols, but that any form of violence is then directed, and in fact sometimes inappropriate referrals also. And then this also requires that within the team members itself, the ongoing sensitivity training and even easing out of intergroup conflict that should happen, which is not happen. We can go to the next slide, Esther.
Thank you, Bonita. I think you've now given us a very good insight into what is happening with regard to your research findings. So I think we are now going to give an opportunity to Dr. De Villiers and to Pastor to just give their input, because I think we must be aware of the time. It's now 22. And Shannon, if you maybe can just go back 2 slides, please. The National Strategic Plan on GB, yes, the previous one. Yes, there we go. So if we look at what they are trying to achieve with this National Strategic Plan on GB, and femicide, the 6 pillars is organized to prevent gender-based violence and to strengthen the criminal justice response to GBV, to provide support, care, and healing to survivors of gender-based violence. So I would just like our 2 other panelists just to remark on this statement, please. What has happened in your sphere? Because we have now heard that new bill has been signed with specific focused, better resourced allocations. So Dr. De Villiers, can we hear your thoughts on this, please?
Yes, thank you so much, Prof. Julie. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here today. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, it's very clear from
Lovely.
my side.
Thank you. So I'll keep it brief, but I want to focus on probably 3 just aspects that I would like to pinpoint and highlight how we try to support our survivors and to provide support, care, and healing. I think that's very much, we have to recognize that's where health comes in. And I think we've
focus, if we think about the intimate partner violence and domestic violence, it's like Bonita just said, we need to think very carefully about screening. How do we support those victims? The stigmatization. A survivor of intimate partner violence is often stuck in a very, very difficult situation. So what's been happening, interestingly, is in some big centers where we have maternity units in a tertiary hospital in Capetown. We have a maternity unit, and we have recently, or in the beginning of this year, they appointed 3 dedicated social workers to work with intimate partner violence survivors. And they started in the maternity unit and the gynae ward, the gynecology ward. And these 3 social workers will do an intake on each and every patient, do a proper intimate partner violence screen, and offer support. But it's so important, because we know with intimate partner violence, there's no point doing a sort of universal screening, asking everybody if you can't offer that support. And we've seen incredible outcomes with our survivors who present to this hospital because of these dedicated social workers. So it's actually, it's a dedicated resource. Yes, there's more manpower or more human resources needed, but it's money very, very well spent. And from the clinical colleagues and the other social workers in that hospital, they gave the feedback that the whole culture is changing in that hospital. Suddenly, all the clinicians are more attuned to thinking about intimate partner violence and gender-based violence as a whole. So there's a definite, you can see the impact of dedicate our resources in the right place. So that was really encouraging, and I do hope that other centers will follow suit. So that's the intimate partner violence, domestic violence side of gender-based violence. And then, of course, we're thinking about the sexual offences. 2 things are really happening on the sexual offences side, is that we came and sat down and realized that a patient who presents within 72 hours, so within 3 days of a rape incident, that is a medical emergency, not a police emergency, not a forensic emergency, not a criminal justice emergency. It is a medical emergency. And therefore, we've realized that we have to open up more entry points. And this is also in line with the National Strategic Plan, is that we must open up more health facilities as an entry point for sexual offences survivors to come forward for care and support, even before we consider the forensic procedures. And hand in hand with that, we've decided that, yes, we've taken part in the national drive to get all our primary healthcare nurses trained. And I had the privilege to be part of a course that we wrote. And it's disseminated throughout the country for primary healthcare nurses, just to look at that initial management of our survivor of sexual offences, so that we don't end up sending a patient away from a medical facility to a police station in order to access medical care. Because with any other medical emergency, we will never say to a patient, listen, sorry, there was a crime committed. I know you're bleeding from your stabbed chest, but please go to the police first, and then they'll get you here for us to administer medical care as soon as possible. We don't do that with any other medical emergency. So our survivors of gender-based violence, sexual violence in particular, they need help and support where they present. So although our Tutuzela care centers are wonderful, we do know that we need to decentralize these services and then channel the referrals into the TCCs. And then just one more thing, we are focusing a lot on many different levels. We're focusing on the connection between teenage pregnancies and child sexual abuse, because there's a lot of so-called statutory rape, which is supposedly crimes that's committed against children between 12 and 16, where the sexual activity is supposedly consensual. But I think our eyes have been opened in the past few months and years that these kids are not really in a situation where they can call it consensual. So even where we suspect statutory rape and statutory sexual abuse, we have realized, well, often this is not, it's not consensual, it's child abuse, resulting in high levels of teenage pregnancies that we must address from a criminal justice point of view, SAPS point of view, but also from a health point of view. So that's all happening. There's more and more resources also being focused on supporting our children who present with teenage pregnancies, and then what happens to that child and the new baby and beyond. So that's a very, very it's a huge aspect of gender-based violence and sexual violence against young girls. So I'm really quite. I hope that we can make some impact there, because that's a big part of the problem in our country. So I'm going to stop it there. There's a lot probably that I can say, Prof. Julie, but thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. And yes, any questions, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. De Villiers. And it's so heartwarming to hear that the 21 billion, which was earmarked to get our country to zero GBV, is really becoming operationalized. It's really, for me, that is really heartwarming to hear that. And what is even more interesting is that it's not just looking at adults, it's actually looking at the children, those who do not have a voice. So thank you for, I think, for this very insightful information that you are sharing with us. And next time, we actually need to start getting also the voices from some of the survivors and from the students. But for now, we are going to just give Pastor Griselda opportunity to share with us what are her realities. So it's over to you, Griselda.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Is it
Yes, you
loud
are
enough?
very clear.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, from our side, I will say I just wanted to make a comment with Doctor that she spoke about now, and the statutory rape and the abuse. So I think there's a critical issue where I feel that we definitely need to agree with that care centers that need to start opening up soon, that we should be moving faster towards that. Reason being is we have found not just in general public, but regarding the church as well, that we need inside help as well, where trauma training and counseling is needed urgently regarding the church. These things are happening in the churches as well when it comes to gender-based violence. So we deal a lot with your marriage, domestic violence inside the church as well. The same with incest that is happening. Doctor just mentioned that as well. And these things, as children grow up thinking that it's a norm, but it's not a norm. Like I said, I'm one of the survivors, and that happened nearly 30 years ago. So I feel that we should have steps that should follow the law, where the law was just given now. We should follow up with those laws as well. How are we implementing our public general workers, our normal people on the ground, your children's church workers, your pastors, your leaders, your business leaders? Trauma counseling and I think trauma training is vital in our society right now. I feel that there's too little institutions that we can really go to besides the hospitals, your police stations. There is just too little hands on board currently. One of the things that I found just now 2 years ago is the teenage pregnancies from rapes inside institutions as well. It causes huge depression, anxiety, mental instability. And these young women, they are not wanting to go to any formal institution to get help. So they're sitting in between the pews, coming to the altars, I'm talking in a church aspect, or even just at a life skills development program that we run. They will come up to us and say, look here, I had an abortion, this rape happened inside a school or at a church or in my home, and she wasn't prepared to raise a rapist child. So that is the issues that we are facing. I mean, it's more than 10 years in the industry that I've been in. I know that gender-based violence has been many, many years, but it's so much more rapidly popping out its head, I will say, where it's people think it's a norm, but it's not. So in what we are teaching young people, especially the students and the teenagers, is that they should know boundaries, they should know their rights, they should also know our country's laws and rights, which is very important, so that they will know what are the steps when a boundary has been taken place. What do you do? What's the next step? And there's no secrets to keeping those violation. They shouldn't keep those things as a secret, so they should speak up. Speaking up is to have a voice for those who are voiceless currently with your younger children. Then also to be also aware of body reactions and how people sit, especially the kiddies, how they play. We should be aware of those trauma situations as well, because children will react a certain way because they don't have a voice. They can't formulate what happened to them. So they will react in play therapy, obviously, or in a setting where they're involved with kids in a play park or in a children's church setting. So that type of training is vital for us to be aware of so that we can help the victims, I will say. But thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And like our South Africa is a very religious country. So I think unless we really start focusing on those aspects of society, we are going to really miss a huge part of trying to get to zero. And then also just in terms of contextualizing this second panel discussion, um, we said at UWC we are committed to building sustainable partnerships within our communities. And we know that every year there's a 16-day activism going on. And because there was a very clear cry, a call, actually a plea from our community members, reps at the last seminar, WHDF has actually decided to build on the themes of the seminar. So we will be reaching out to you in terms of how do we actually equip society. Like you've talked about, there's now interesting, there's a rolling out, it's more focused. But like you've said, Griselda, we need to provide people with the necessary training. So there will be a training happening, and I will again come knocking on your door because I regard you as part of our partners, WHGF and UWC's partners, to come on board. And it's currently scheduled, planned for the first week in December. So please keep your calendars open for a possible training workshop for community members with a rollout of how do we identify and manage the facilities available in South Africa. So, and I know we've taken a lot of time. We only have 5 minutes left for questions. So if the audience would like to pose some questions to our panelists, please feel free to do so.
Yeah. You can just unmute yourself and talk, please, because you're labeled Shannon Ferreira. You can introduce yourself. One hand is raised here. Please unmute and ask your question. Or you can just post your question in the chat box. Please stop the presentation, please, the share. Yeah. Thank you. We have one hand raised. You can just go ahead with your question. Yes, sir.
Hello. At the outset, I thank the WHTF and UWC to organize this webinar. I was fortunate enough to visit this Tutizuala center providing comprehensive care to victims of GBV. Everything was being provided under one roof. And I heard that there are multiple centers in Cape Town providing similar services, and there was good networking, and they were also providing rehabilitation and follow-up facilities. I have a few questions to the panelists. Some of them could be little sensitive, but I dare to ask this. Whether we have any prevalence of GBV pre-independence and post-independence, that is one. And is it a racial problem or a cultural problem of such a high prevalence of GBV? When I analyze this problem after visiting thrice the south of this country, I find that mainly the poverty, less education, rampant use of drugs, addictions, high crime rate, availability of weapons, unemployment. These are the basic root causes of this high incidence of GBV. You did mention that government is taking actions to prevent this problem of GBV, but is government sensitive enough to deal with this issue? And our attempts are being made, at least next generation students, and through their curriculum, problem of GBV can be lessened. When we talk of reaching to zero GBV, it's a real, if it happens, it would be a big dream coming true. But unless these basic issues in the country are sorted out, I am very skeptical about this happening so. Thank you very much.
It was actually a mouthful, so please, panelists, feel free to comment. I think the first part focused on what was the prevalence before we became a democracy and afterwards. And I think, Bonita, you actually had the stats in one of your slides.
It's also a very the relevance of this question has also been done by HRC and Constellation for Violence. We didn't have that much monitoring and recording prior to independence, specifically with gender-based violence. So that when the onset of the democracy happened in 1994, which has been a very, very by Witten and all these known researchers, the significance have between 1994 and 1995, because of the improvement of the documentation and the monitoring, already then it was such high crime rate. So I would go out to say that the research statistics did not make a significant higher or lower before and after. If you look at it in terms of the generalized violence, it was generalized violence that was reported on. But gender-based violence has been a problem pre and post the apartheid years in South Africa. If I can just give that overall picture.
Thank you, Bonita. Mayani is there.
And if I may just add that I think what was also significant is that during and after the research after the pandemic, it actually showed a definite increase in the prevalence. And what was also so sad during that time, they actually reported that a lot of these were actually for the underage, usually female children. So definitely, so there's a strive towards getting to zero. But like we know, there's at least this time around, there's earmarked funds. There is they bringing resources closer to home, and that is positive. So let us build on the positives. Understanding that the government cannot do it all. That is why this current strategy is to bring in private as well as civil society. The second part of your question? Who would like to continue with that?
Second question,
I-
I think, is about
Yeah.
being
Is it a
skeptical.
racial problem? Racial differences. Are there any racial differences?
I would ask also our clinician doctor to respond. But you know the significance with specific intimate partner violence in South Africa? It happens in all spheres, all races, all income classes. It happens. So there was really maybe the areas again where it's in the private sector not so, but there's only now initiatives. And Dr. De Villiers has been involved in setting up in the private sector here in Cape Town, where now women are presented at the emergency setups in a private, confidential area, and now only do we have private health establishment recording gender-based violence. So now we are moving to be able to even document in all spheres of the middle income and above the type of incidents and how the prevalence in the private sector. So definitely it happens all around in all the counties. I think Dr. De Villiers, if you can also input in here, please.
Yes, Bonita, thank you. So you're right, especially with domestic violence, intimate partner violence happens across the board. And then from my experience in working in the Tutuzela case centers, the sexual offences demographics represent the makeup of our communities. So it represents the proportion of our sort of communities and the makeup of our communities, and there's no racial, there's no cultural and racial differences, not from our experience, at least in the metro. And then, yeah, so that's all I would say is it happens to men, women, boy children, girl children, and it happens within wherever our communities are, and our victims represent that community makeup. And then I will leave it to somebody else to think about the sort of multiple sort of causes, the root causes. You're right. Our colleague is right in listing those. It's just hard not to become despondent when we think about all those root causes of violence, and then there's just so much more to say about the root causes as well.
There is
I have
another
last question to ask. What percentage of culprits are drug addicts?
I beg your pardon?
What percentage of those culprits who are offenders are drug addicts?
Dr. Bangle, I think if we can actually add to this discussion the different links, it will give you that detail. So if you, I've actually put it on the slides, you will get an overview of the current stats. And we can actually add to that and just make it like a resource reference for the people. But I would like to pick up on your previous point where you actually refer to training. I think I'm the eternal optimist in terms of that behavior is learned, so it can be unlearned. And it starts with the family structure and the role modeling that is happening. So I think there is a definite change in direction in terms of clarifying and addressing some of the root causes. And we know what is the big one. That hasn't changed. Patriarchy is very much there. Things are put in place, but unless the family structure, unless the father and the boy children demonstrate and that they actually see the girl as equal, that won't change. We know that South Africa is a very huge violent culture. We have a lot of gangs, but that is not unique to South Africa. If you look at WHO documents, it is actually not unique. Maybe what was unique is that we did not previously had the resources to quantify it. And now it's now becoming an open discussion. That is why there's now more resources. And having said that, there has been a huge drive um, from the health sector response and the medical research council to inculcate gender-based training in health professional training. And I think WHDF is uniquely situated to bring back the training. Let us again let GBV again form an integral part of all interprofessional education training. So and we have the resources. We can maybe just adapt it to our specific context. We have worked on those things, but now how do we actually operationalize those kind of things? So, Dr. Bangle, thank you for your very uprooting questions, going to the core. But we have to be really honest to be able to get to zero.
Okay, Hester,
And
sorry.
Thank you very
There's
much.
another question from Kamaini. I think she's raised her hand for a long time. Kamaini, if you could take
Yeah,
her
yeah.
question.
Yeah. Just a quick question. Like one of the panelists talked about the teenage pregnancies due to rape and the fact that if the abortion doesn't happen, they don't want to raise the child. So I want to know what happens to those children, and I would also want to know the status of abortion services available there. On the sidebar, in this particular center, in our conference on the move, I think Dr. Bangal and I think Samriddhi, who's here, had gone. I wanted to ask why men are not allowed. Men are perpetrators, but as Hester also just said, that until and unless we don't sensitize them. So if anybody from the panel can respond about the center not allowing men inside. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, can I just ask you to clarify which center it is where men are not allowed?
Dr. Bangal, it is the same center you visited, right?
Yeah, same center.
Yeah, the same center. Yeah.
Behind that, there was a residential facility for those girls, and it was the male delegates were not allowed to visit that.
Okay, are you referring to the Sarki Bartman Center? I think the Sarki Bartman Center is for their safety, because there has been cases where the perpetrators actually not just assaulted the staff, but trying to take out the ladies as well. So it's safety issues with regard to that.
Okay, can you
Is that
please
correct?
reply the first part on the teenage pregnancy, please?
Yes, I will do. Unfortunately, we have very limited social services resources and facilities where young mums can be looked after. So we try to support the pregnant teenagers once they have their babies. We try to support them within the families, and sometimes if they are very young, they can be put into foster care with their babies. So that facility is there. It's a function of the Department of Social Development, although definitely not enough of those resources, unfortunately, to support these children. Abortion services, termination of pregnancy. We have a very, very strong choice on Termination of Pregnancy Act, which allows a person of any age to access termination services, which means that a teenager can actually go and request a termination of pregnancy without being supported by family or friends or parents or guardians. So it's a very liberal piece of legislation which allows for easy access and services to termination services. The problem with teenagers, it's often that they don't realize they are pregnant, and then when they realize they're pregnant, it's often too late for termination. So that is unfortunately a problem. But our termination services, especially in the bigger centers like Capetown and the sort of metro centers, where our services are very well resourced. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you for it.
Do we have? Yes, I do agree, Amani, with you. GBV occurs without drugs, without alcohol also. We cannot blame only alcohol or drug addiction. That is we think that that is the cause. It is not so. If you just look at the statistics, it is not. What do you say, Mani? Amani would like to say something on that. Please unmute yourself.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I have a lot of work on GBV in my country too. It is not only the drug or alcohol to blame. It is also the socioeconomic conditions, poverty, and lack of education had very, very strong influence. And women are also responsible because they are silent. They accept violence. So they stay free, frozen, and do not report it. So they escalate it. So the attitude of the community, if the neighbor is abusing his wife or his children, nobody moves unless someone has the courage and report it, but not everywhere, unfortunately. So it needs work on the community in many countries. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah.
Any other comments? Nigat, you would like to say something?
I think this is very universal, and I think it's the mindset. Somehow the other, we've not been able. I mean, I've seen educated people also. I mean, I won't say it's only illiteracy or poverty. We tend to focus so much on illiteracy and poverty that we tend to ignore these elite and the other class group of people who also indulge in this. So I think it's a very, I mean, it's one of those areas that we need to probe more, but it's nothing, I mean, it's a very combination. Then there's a mindset also regarding men, men can do a lot of things. They can harm women, culturally, religiously, they have this, and then women should be subdued and women should accept, everything that's happening to them and even, being harassed. So I think it's culture, it's tradition, maybe to a religion to an extent. It's been a religion being exploited, but not in the true sense, it shouldn't we have been there. But yes, we need to educate our women, rightfully so. They should know what is right and what is wrong. And that's where I think education and training is very important, right from the school days, right from school days we need to look into the curriculum, and we portray the pictures, we portray men as strong and women as subdued. So I think this whole, I mean, TV shows and all also portrayed men being, they can go ahead and slap women, I mean, and being violent to women. So I think all these things have to change, and there has to be a bigger movement than what we are doing today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can we have some final comments before we close? Am I there? So as rightly said, that there are a lot of intricate, factors woven, and it could not be just one factor, not poverty only, or not drug addiction or alcohol or patriarchy. It's like interwoven together into the system in the communities, and somewhere rightly said that women's education, empowerment, giving a voice to women, that could be one of the ways. We may not be getting to zero very quickly. That's, but we need to work on it. We have a lot of work to do.
Yes.
So let me thank our moderator, Professor Hester Julie, and our panelists, Dr. Griselda, Dr. Reen de Villiers, and I think we have Bonita here, and I'm missing somebody. Please remind me, Hester. We had 4 panelists.
It's only the 3 of them. It's
Yeah.
only the 3 of them. Thank you very much.
Thank
to
you very
acknowledge all 3 of them.
A lot of thoughts and a lot of work there carved out before us, and Women and Health Together for Future will be speaking on this cause again and again, and we would like all of you to join again and again with us. Thank you for those who have joined. Dr. Ashok Naniwal, I can see Sergio, Dr. Hester, Samriddhi, of course, Banadin is there, Mohammed, Vishnupriya. You would like to say something before we close? So thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, I hadn't attended the conference, so this was actually kind of, it actually gave me an insight into the center, the activities, and I have to say, I'm really impressed because this is an issue which is not restricted to Cape Town, but this is something which every region is facing. So it was really great getting to know the beautiful work that they have actually been doing, and I'm really glad.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vishnu Priya. And I would like to request those who would like to join our organization. So we have our website, w24f.org. Please visit and join us. And we would like to see you working with us. Thank you so very much, and see you all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.